run from my given disaster. Speed away from the holy mind. Pride, that's where I never thought it would matter.
Hey everybody, my name's Will, and today we are going to be talking about whether or not you should buy an Evo in the year 2018. What we're going to do is we're going to look at 3 things you should consider before you decide whether or not you should buy an Evo. If I don't answer your specific questions, feel free to comment below with any individual questions that you have. If you're interested in any more Evo content, questions, or anything of that nature, definitely just let me know and subscribe. Alright, so there's 3 main problems if you're considering buying an Evo. First is you may not know which Evo you should buy. The second one is, are Evos still relevant considering some of the newer cars out there, you know, the Focus RS, Civic Type R, so forth and so on. And third, finding an Evo that is not only the one that you want, but something that is going to be a good car to own, hasn't been hacked to pieces or anything like that. Alright, so first things first, buying an Evo, much like any other performance car, is not a logical decision. However, I always like to say, if you're going to do something wrong, at least do it right. So with that in mind, give you a little bit of background on my history. My first Evo was an 06 Evo 9 GSR that I bought brand new off the lot. After that, I bought the Evo that we're sitting in right now. This is a 2005 Evo 8 RS. And then after buying this car, I also bought a 2014 Evo 10 MR, which I have since sold. Nothing against the car, just different personal reasons. And if I wasn't clear, I no longer own the Evo 9 either. So I'm left with just the Evo 8 RS right now. There's a lot of unique things to the RSs. A lot of people aren't even familiar with the model that existed. We can get into that in more detail in another video if people are actually interested. Today we're just going to focus more high level on choosing the right Evo. Let's talk about the first question. You're not sure which Evo to buy. Now in the US, there's 11 model years spanning the Evo 8, 9, and 10. In the 8s and 9s, you have the option for the RS, GSR, and MR. For the 10s, you have the GSR and the MR. There was a couple special editions sprinkled in there. Not really too relevant to a lot of this. Odds are you won't run across them. But just to hit on them real quick, in the 9s, there was a special edition that had a lot of the MR bits onto a GSR, minus the transmission, so that was nice. And on the 10s, I think it was actually 2010 or 2011, there was a special edition that actually had the MR dual clutch in the GSR body. So if you really want a dual clutch, but you don't want all the MR added weight, that's an option as well. Now, as I mentioned, I've owned 3 Evos. I bought all 3 of them at very different times in my life and for very different purposes. The first one I bought brand new, didn't really know much about the cars, was afraid to buy used, so I just played it safe and went new. This RS, I specifically found one with high miles. I wasn't consciously looking to buy an Evo, but at the same time, I was always kind of keeping an eye on the market. When this one popped up, it was a good deal. It was actually the cheapest running Evo in America listed on AutoTrader at the time. The guy he wasn't an exchange student per se, but he had lived in the US for a few years and now he was going back. And I think he does that occasionally. And so, but anyways, he needed to get rid of the car, and thankfully for me, did a really poor job of taking photos of it and everything, and it looked terrible. I mean, I'll give him credit. He highlighted all the defects, but he highlighted them so much that it made the entire car at first glance look terrible. In fact, I actually skipped over at first glance, and then a few days later I was bored at work at the time and just decided to look into it a little bit deeper, and that's when I realized that a lot of the things he was highlighting weren't that big of a deal, could be easily fixed, and so I proceeded on from there. As you can imagine, being the cheapest one in America at the time, it also had decently high miles. I want to say it had about 105 or 110,000 when I bought it, which honestly isn't that bad, but it was certainly up there. However, it's all stock, so I didn't have to worry about any concerns for modifications, everything again. And despite the fact that you actually saw me pull the car out, there's really not anything too seriously wrong with it. I've just been having life priorities get in the way right now, and it's just been kind of a back burner project for me. And again, if people are more interested in my specific Evo situation and so forth, I can go into more detail on that at another time. So as I mentioned, you've got the 3 generations. Now I got on Auto Trader real quick, and by the way, I'm sure it should be obvious from my channel view count and everything, but I don't get paid to talk about anybody, and I'm not suggesting you use Auto Trader or anything like that, but it was just the easiest to look it up. The cheapest Evo 8 I could find was just shy of 16,000. Cheapest Evo 9 was 20,000, and the cheapest Evo 10 was 18,000. Now you'll notice that the 9 actually costs more than the 10. We can get into that a little bit more in a moment, but basically you're going to find that as commonplace. And when I say these were the cheapest that ran and didn't have just insane amount of miles. I think I limited it to like 100,000 just to kind of give you a point of reference. So let's talk about the generations. Evo 8 is in the US the 2003 to 2005. In 2004, they introduced the RS model, and in 2005, they introduced the MR model in addition to the RS. So 2005 is the only Evo 8 that has the GSR, the RS, and the MR. In 2006, they introduced the Evo 9, which came out in GSR, RS, MR again. And then there was a hiatus for a year, and then in 2008, all the way up to 2015, you have the Evo 10, which came in GSR and MR, minus the special editions mixed in there. All right, so when shopping for an Evo, chances are, unless you are just a diehard Evo person, or you've owned Evos in the past and you're looking for something specific, it's really going to boil down to, do you want an Evo 8 or 9 generation, because they're very similar in looks, or do you want the 10? I would say if it's your first Evo, don't get hung up on whether or not it's an 8 or a 9. Now, if you run across a good deal and it's a 9, by all means, but I wouldn't probably put a lot of emphasis on finding a 9, because you are going to pay that premium, which, to be quite honest, isn't necessarily worth it. Now, I haven't followed modding Evo 9s lately, but I know at the time, because the Evo 8s were out for several more years versus the Evo 9 for just that 1 year, that you could actually make more power and there was more options for modifications for the 8 than the 9. Now, we're not going to delve too deep into modifications and what you can do, but let's just say that while a lot of the parts are interchangeable, there are a few things with the 9 that's different, mostly related to the MyVec and so forth. So your cams and internal motor components are going to be different. If we're going to go with an Evo 8 or 9, you've got the GSR, the RS, and the MR. We're going to hit on them real quick here. The RS, like I'm in right now, this is the stripped down version. I've got no power windows, no power locks, no ABS brakes. It didn't come with a stereo. I do have one in here now. Most of the sound deadening material is gone. It's just the lightweight version. It's going to be a little bit more hardcore. I mean, all the Evos are hardcore, but it's going to be just a little bit more in that regard. And then you're going to have the GSR, which is the mid-level as far as like options and so forth. In the 8s and 9s, you're going to get all your power locks, windows, keyless entry, all that stuff that you're expecting in a modern car. And then the MR. The MR is going to have some, or should have some special tweaks to it, such as the BBS wheels, the vortex generators, and a couple other little bits like that. The main primary difference though is the MR is going to have a 6-speed transmission. Now, if this is a MR that's never been modded and driven easily, good luck. I wouldn't necessarily let that be a turning off point. You just got to be aware that, let's put it this way, if I was shopping for an Evo, I wouldn't discourage an MR. However, in the back of my mind, I'm going to budget $800 to $1,000 for a potential transmission rebuild or potential swap or so forth. So if you don't want to get into that stuff, or you're just completely new and you just want an Evo that you can drive and get the most out of, I'd probably find a GSR, to be completely honest. That way you can get all the little amenities. I don't mind not having keyless entry and stuff like that. To me, it's kind of part of the charm. So if you're looking for an 8 or a 9 generation, probably going to look for a GSR. And you're not really going to even have to look for a GSR, because if you do a search, they're pretty much all going to be GSRs, and then a few MRs. At times, I'll get online and I'll search for RSs, and there won't even be any for sale in the US. I think there's one for sale right now. Super expensive. It's got like a built motor and so forth. That's obviously not going to be what you're looking for if this is your first Evo. So that leaves us with the 10 then. If you decide you want something even a little bit more modern, So the Evo 10 came out and was meant to be more of an upscale, almost kind of encroaching on the M3, S4, that type of cars. You know, it's definitely a nicer car. You know, the fit and finish is better, the ride quality is better. Functionality, I will say possibly better. The one issue I had is they moved the battery to the trunk in the 10s for better weight distribution, but in doing so, it made the trunk insanely small. The one thing I've always loved when I had my 8 to 9 Evos is very practical cars. You could fit 5 people easily, you had a huge trunk, you could store a bunch of stuff in. With the 10, you actually felt a little bit more restricted in that regard. So that may not be an issue for you. I know most people don't think about trunk space when they're looking at cars like this, but it is insanely small. So you might just want to take a peek in one just to make sure you're okay with that, because even if you're the type, you know, like I play hockey occasionally, you know, even getting a hockey bag in there was starting to be a bit of a stretch and so forth. So, I mean, I still want it to be a car I can drive everywhere. So just keep that in mind. Aside from that, it's really going to come down to styling, your budget, and how much you want to mod the car if you want to mod it. I swear 9 out of 10 people say they're just going to mod it and build the motor and all that stuff, but just be honest with yourself what you're truly going to do. And I would say if you're just looking for a fun car that handles well and maybe you're going to do a few bolt-ons or something, there's nothing wrong with getting an Evo 10. There's a ton of them out there, so the prices are lower. You can find good ones easily, and they're still a lot of fun to drive. So I would definitely consider that, especially if you're thinking of newer cars as a comparison. If you're maybe comparing to the Focus RS or the Civic Type R and so forth, it's going to be probably a little bit more comparable in those sense when you test drive them. Oh, which, by the way, good luck getting the test drive. So speaking of newer cars, you know, the thing you're probably going to ask yourself is, you know, is buying a used Evo better than buying a new or newer car? And that's really just going to depend on your preference. You know, as we've talked about, this isn't a rational decision anyways. So a lot of, you know, personality and preferences are going to be what drives this. I know for me that if I was going to spend the money, absolutely. If I was going to go out and spend around $30,000 on a car and I was comparing the Type R and the Focus and the Evo, I'm going to go with the Evo hands down. But again, I like the cars, I prefer them and so forth, and that's just nothing against those cars. In fact, I own a Focus ST. That's my wife's primary car. And so I have no issues with them. It's just for my money, I'm going to go with an Evo. I will say, though, is check your insurance. Evos can be insanely expensive to insure at times. I know when I got rid of the Evo 10, I wasn't quite sure what I was going to get to replace it. Looked at a bunch of different things, everything from, you know, the Focus ST that we ended up getting to BMWs and everything in between. And I did not find one car where the insurance premium was going to go up. And it was kind of funny talking to the insurance company every time I would call to get a quote to see what it would change it to. And they were always kind of surprised. Okay, if we take away the Mitsubishi and we add the BMW, your premium will go down. So there was always that kind of humor in there. So, but keep that in mind. I don't know what the premiums are on like an RS or Type R or something. So with the Evos, what you have to understand is they didn't take a Lancer and put a more powerful engine in it. They didn't take a Lancer and put a more powerful engine and drivetrain in it. What they did was they took a Lancer, saw what it looked like, and then built a new Lancer out of aluminum, and then put a new motor and new transmission in them. Now the 10s I think differ in this slightly. I don't know what the percentages are, but I know in the 8s and 9s, for example, that when you have an Evo next to a Lancer, they only share like 1 or 2 body panels. The hood, the roof, the trunk, the fenders, the doors, all of that is Evo specific. So it severely ups the cost of repairs, which severely ups the cost of insurance. Another thing to consider, and I don't know if this is still an issue, but back when I had my Evo 9, the Evo was ranked number 2 behind the Escalade for most stolen car in America, which when you consider how many Evos there are out there, that's pretty impressive versus how many Cadillac Escalades there were rolling around at the time. So that was driving costs too. So definitely check your insurance. Even if you're an amazing, perfect driver with the best record, I would still check your insurance before buying any Evo, just to make sure you're aware of that. And lastly, something you always should be considering when you're buying cars is their resale value and how well they hold up. Even if you think to yourself, I'm going to keep this car for the rest of my life, life has a way of changing the way things go. I know that the Evo that I have currently has gone up in value. You know, like I said, if you look for the cheapest Evo 8s out there now, they cost significantly more than what I paid for this one. So if I ever got into a situation, you know, like I said, I could fix this car pretty easily. Again, it's just a back burner thing right now, and sell it and get all my money back, no problem. Probably then some. Now, we're not going to go into the debate of buying cars as an investment, because as somebody who used to work in finance, cars are a terrible investment. Even if you buy a car and it does go up in value, let me just tell you, I could have done way better taking the money I spent on this car and investing it in the market and gotten a way higher return, so it doesn't matter. But just keep that in mind. If you go out and you buy a used $30,000 Evo 10, and you go out and you buy a brand new whatever and it costs $30,000, well, the Evo is going to depreciate a lot less. First of all, because it's used, so it's already taken that initial hit. Second of all, Evos just are going to hold their value more. I mean, if you think about it, the car we're sitting in right now, when it was new in 2005, stickered for right around $27,000, and an Evo 8, cheapest one in America, 05 or so forth, you're still going to be spending 14, 15K easily for one with 100,000 miles. Now, if you go back and you look for a 2005 BMW 3 Series or a 2005 Honda Accord or 2005 anything else, none of them are going to be worth $15,000. And even if you think about higher end cars that cost significantly more money, you know, even a 2005 M3, I didn't look it up, probably costs more than $13,000, $14,000, but not much more. And when you consider that car costs double or more what this car costs new, that's a huge depreciation hit. So keep that in mind as well. I don't ultimately let that make my decisions, but it should be on the list of things you consider just farther down. All right, so let's say you decided that you are going to buy an Evo. Let's talk about the third problem, and that is finding the Evo that you want. Be patient, and frankly, good luck. They're hard to find. Like I said, when I bought this one, I wasn't even technically shopping for one. Ever since I got rid of my 9, I always knew I wanted to buy another one, and just kind of kept an eye out. When this one popped up, it was in a price range that I was comfortable with. Didn't have any modifications, so I was okay with the higher miles. It was the RS, which made it a little bit more unique to me. Some people will get away from it for that reason, but for me it was fine. So you really need to understand what you want and what you want to spend, and then just kind of be patient. As I said, you know, it's not like you're gonna say one day, all right, I've decided I'm buying an Evo, hopefully I can get one next week, you know, let's go looking around town for one, because there's a good chance that you could pull up, and like, I live in Cincinnati, and oftentimes when I pull up every Evo within 30, 40 miles, there's nothing, or one or two or something. So once you decide that you want an 8 or a 9 or a 10, and you want specific years, or a GSR or an MR or RS, then actually finding it's going to be a process. I would also probably encourage you to maybe be a little open to different colors and so forth. There's nothing wrong with wanting a specific color, but if this is your first Evo especially, you could be spending a long time hunting down a specific color. Also keep in mind that they didn't make every color every year, and certain models like the RS, for example, only come in red and white for weight reasons. We don't have to get into that right now, so just keep that in mind. Definitely look to make sure all the VIN numbers match. I would suggest doing a cold start. If it's out of town, you know, have them Skype you and do a cold start. Just have them put their hand on the manifold or something once they start the car, so you can verify that it is cold. Those are some little things you can do. Obviously, Carfax, auto check, any of those things. And just be mindful of any modifications. To be honest, finding an Evo with no modifications is gonna be hard. It's not impossible, but you can do it. I have no problem buying an Evo with modifications. The issue I have, and the issue a lot of sellers have, although I don't think they realize it, is even if I plan on modding an Evo, even if I buy it knowing that tomorrow I'm going to order an exhaust and an intake and so forth, there's a good chance that I already know what exhaust and what intake and so forth that I want. So just because you're selling one that already has an exhaust doesn't really mean a whole lot to me, because there's a good chance I'm just going to take that off anyways. So modifications generally do not add value and oftentimes can decrease value. Just keep that in mind, be realistic. Now, on the other side of that though, if I find a car that has an exhaust and has an intake and they're the exact ones that I wanted anyways, well then absolutely, why not? If I can get the car and save some money on some modifications right off the bat, great. Keep a couple things in mind though when you're looking at cars that have or have had modifications. What makes the Evo platform so great is also what can make it very alarming to a used car shopper who buys a car thinking everything's fine just to find out otherwise later, in that they mod well and they also tolerate problems. So you can't, some cars, if you modify them and you change something and you don't do it right, it. Even if you change something simple and it screws up whatever, the car's going to run like crap, and it's very obvious. With the Evo, that's not always the case, especially if you've never driven an Evo, haven't spent any time around them. People can mod these themselves, do a poor job, not tune them, things like that, and you could get in it and think, yeah, this ride's fine, sounds good, it runs good, pulls hard and everything, only later to dig in a little deeper and realize there's a lot of issues. If you are looking at a car that has mods, unless you know what you're doing, I would say don't buy it, or only buy it if they can show you receipts for all of the modifications from a reputable shop. And it drives me nuts, but so many times they'll be like, oh, I had all the work done at so-and-so shop down the street from my house, so, they're a good shop, you can call them. But they're a good shop at, doing mufflers for pickup trucks or something. Has no idea anything about Evos, and you let them build your motor or something crazy. So just be mindful of that. If it's a reputable shop, and if you don't know which ones they are, and they'll change from time to time, but generally Busher, AMS, English Racing, all-wheel drive, STM, just to name a few. I'm sure there's others out there. You can get on Evo M and look this stuff up too if you have any specific questions. Or if you're unsure, comment below or message me, and I can let you know if I know anything about them or point you in any direction as far as resources. And last but not least, let's assume that the car checks out and everything's good. How are you going to buy this car? So mine's an 05, and I bought this about 3 years ago. Actually, it was 3 years ago, like 3 days ago. And it's financed through my credit union at a great interest rate, and my payment's insanely low. So I don't have anything to worry about. I didn't have to put any money down, didn't even have to put the taxes down. Again, I have a finance background. I hate putting cash out if I can borrow for less. So me personally, I will always finance everything. We don't have to get into the debate of, why you shouldn't pay cash for a car. Just know that you shouldn't. And the only people that should pay cash for a car is... Honestly, I can't even think of why you would want to pay cash for a car. Because to be honest, let's say you have terrible credit and the bank will loan you the money to buy the car, but they want 15% interest. So what? Pay the 15% interest for a year, refinance it, build your credit back up, and fix the problem, because your credit's not going to fix itself. So, you got to start somewhere. Alternatively, if you have good credit and you can finance it for a really low interest rate, this one's like 3%, well, historically the market's done 7 to 8%. So 7 to 8% minus 3%, I'm still getting 4 or 5%. I'm better off keeping my cash. Now, where people mess up is they don't have the cash to buy the car, or in a financial situation where, they lose their job, or, crisis happens and they don't have the money anywhere else. They can't get it. They've got this high car payment, and now they're in trouble. So you got to keep that in mind. Now, I'm not saying that I'm just going to, if my financial crisis went completely sideways tomorrow and I needed to sell this car, and I'm not upside down on it because I've had it for a few years and my interest rate's really low, but let's say that I was, or a perfect example is our Focus ST that we just bought. We're still, because I financed taxes on that, even though I got a really good deal, I'd say we're probably still a little upside down on it because we've only had it a couple months. And if I needed to get out of that, that's fine. I'll go pay the difference and get out of it. But if you're in a position where you're literally paycheck to paycheck, well, you shouldn't be looking at buying an Evo anyway. It doesn't really apply in this situation. How do you get approved on a loan for a car that's 10 plus years old? Easily. Credit unions. I go through GE Credit Union. If you live in the Cincinnati area and you are not a member, you're insane if you like to buy used cars, older cars, because all they care about is how much you're borrowing versus what the car's worth and what your credit is. That's it. If you have poor credit, or I shouldn't say poor credit, if you have less than perfect credit, they may only loan you 80% of the value. If you have decent credit, they'll give you 100. If you have good credit, they'll give you more than 100% of the value. So I'm always able to just throw in the taxes. As tempting as it was to ask them for even more money and then mod the car right away, that I wouldn't do. It's one thing to borrow money to buy a car. It's another thing to borrow money to buy your modifications. Don't do that. If you don't live in the Cincinnati area, I don't know which credit union is going to be best. There's a ton of them out there. I would look around, ask around, and they're all going to be different. I was part of another credit union before this, and if a car was over so many years old, they would only finance it for 2 years. Keep that in mind. Like I said, I know with GE, I'm allowed to usually finance 6 or 7 or 8 years, depending on how old it is. Then they do start to cut it off so long. I think if it's after so many years, they'll only do 5, but still, 5 years is plenty to buy a used Evo or used anything for that matter. The one time I do say cash is handy in these scenarios is, especially if you're going out of town and buying it from a private party, is you can go with cash and buy it, then come back with the title and then have your credit union or bank or whatever give you a loan on it. I did that when I bought my R1. I just took cash with me. It was like $6,000 or $7,000. It wasn't that far. It was like an hour drive. Went up there, bought it, came back, took the title in, got a lien on it, and was on the way. Don't go flying or cross country or anything with tons of cash. That's a bad idea. There's things you can do. You can wire money. If you're not familiar with these things, again, I have a finance background, so I'm accustomed to sending bank wires and so forth, but they can be extremely dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. So please, please, please do not send a bank wire unless you are 100% sure you know what you're doing. And if you don't know what you're doing, don't even ask. Just don't do it, because for all intents and purposes, once you send that wire, it's gone. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter who owes what to who and what agreements were made and so forth. The money's gone. So you really just need to look at it. Yeah, there are ways you can fight it and get it back, but it's hard. This isn't like you swipe your credit card and you call American Express and file a claim. It's going to be a nightmare. Definitely avoid that. Stick with cashier's checks, not money orders. If they have issues with that, I would just politely educate them a little bit on it. I know when I bought this car, that's what I did. I went with a cashier's check. I even told the guy what bank it was coming from and had him call in and on his own, told him the bank that I was using, let him Google it and everything. So, it wasn't me providing the phone number or anything. He called. I told him the loan officer that I was dealing with. He asked for them. They confirmed that, yeah, I was getting a check made out to him and was valid and everything. So that's going to be a lot safer for everybody involved. All right. So in closing, I hope you've learned a few things about Evos. And if you are going to buy one, as I said in the beginning, should you buy one in 2018? There's really no reason not to. When I watch the values, they're going up. If you want an Evo and you have the means and that's what you've wanted to buy or whatever, there's nothing wrong with doing it now. I don't see the values really going down much unless possibly you're talking like Evo Tens. When I say the values are going up, I'm talking about the 8s and 9s. If you're going with the 10s, if you're looking at the earlier ones, I would say like the 08s and 09s, the 2010s, they're probably getting fairly close to their bottom points. Like I said, some of those are getting down to 18 and so forth, but they're going to drop a little bit more, which is fine. There's nothing wrong. Like, you shouldn't be only buying cars that you think are going to go up in value, because chances are you're going to be wrong anyways. Plus, if you're going to buy something this irresponsible to begin with, you might as well have a little fun and get the car that you want. That being said, obviously the newer it is, the more it's going to depreciate as far as the 10s go. The 8s and 9s, unless you buy one with like insanely low miles, you buy one with 20,000 miles and you rack up 100,000 miles on it in a matter of a year or so, yeah, that's probably going to hurt your value a little bit, but generally speaking, you're going to be fine. If you are going to mod it and you care anything about retaining value, I strongly suggest you just pay a shop to do it. Even if the shop's going to charge you an extra $500 to install a part, so what? You know, my time's worth more than that, and chances are you could probably go work overtime at your job or something like that and make most of that money anyways to just pay them, and then you have that peace of mind knowing that you've got the receipts, you've got a warranty maybe of some sort, and if you go to sell it, any potential buyer is going to be a lot more comfortable with that versus, yeah, I ordered this exhaust and I installed it in my garage and then I tuned it with my own personal laptop. I don't care who you are, as a buyer, that's just never what you want to hear. All right, so that's going to do it for this video. I hope it was helpful. If you've got any specific questions, again, about your thinking about buying an Evo, you know, leave a comment below. I'd be happy to answer and help you out in any way that I can. If you liked this video, found it useful, or want to know more about my situation or Evos in general, you know, please subscribe, let me know. I'd be happy to do some more of these. In the meantime, good luck out there. Be patient and find a car that you're going to love. See you guys.